Question 1. The analysis reveals that an applicant for a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit has provided documentation that appears to meet most, but not all, of the statutory requirements outlined in Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351. Specifically, while the applicant has completed a handgun safety course, the certificate is slightly older than the maximum allowed timeframe, and there is a minor discrepancy in the applicant's listed address compared to official records. Considering the process optimization for issuing these permits in Tennessee, which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional responsibility? Option A. Issue the permit with a note acknowledging the minor discrepancies, assuming the applicant's intent to comply is sufficient. Option B. Request the applicant to provide a newly dated handgun safety course certificate and updated proof of address to ensure full compliance with Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351 before proceeding with the application. Option C. Proceed with issuing the permit based on the applicant's otherwise clean record and the assumption that the minor documentation issues are inconsequential. Option D. Deny the permit application immediately due to the identified documentation discrepancies, without offering the applicant an opportunity to correct them. Correct answer is B. Request the applicant to provide a newly dated handgun safety course certificate and updated proof of address to ensure full compliance with Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351 before proceeding with the application. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between an individual's right to self-defense and the strict legal requirements for carrying a handgun in Tennessee. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA Section 39-17-1351, which governs the enhanced handgun carry permit, while also considering the ethical responsibility to act lawfully and safely. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to severe legal consequences and compromise public safety. The best approach involves a thorough and documented understanding of the applicant's eligibility based on the specific criteria outlined in TCA Section 39-17-1351. This includes verifying that the applicant meets all the statutory requirements, such as age, residency, completion of a handgun safety course, and the absence of disqualifying criminal convictions or mental health adjudications. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the legal framework established by Tennessee law for issuing enhanced handgun carry permits. It prioritizes compliance with the statute, ensuring that only qualified individuals are granted the permit, thereby upholding public safety and the integrity of the permitting process. An incorrect approach would be to rely on informal assurances or anecdotal evidence regarding the applicant's character or past behavior, without verifying these against official records and statutory disqualifiers. This fails to meet the legal mandate of TCA Section 39-17-1351, which requires specific checks and balances. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to ensure public safety. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook minor discrepancies in documentation, such as incomplete training certificates or slightly outdated identification, under the assumption that they are not significant. This is a regulatory failure because TCA Section 39-17-1351 specifies precise requirements for documentation, and any deviation can render the application invalid and potentially lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual. Finally, assuming an applicant is eligible simply because they have a clean record in a different state, without conducting the required Tennessee-specific background checks and verification, is a critical regulatory oversight. Tennessee law requires adherence to its specific criteria, and interstate reciprocity does not negate the need for compliance with Tennessee's statutory requirements for initial permit issuance. Professional decision-making in such situations should follow a systematic process. First, thoroughly review the relevant Tennessee statutes and administrative rules governing handgun carry permits. Second, meticulously examine all submitted documentation against these legal requirements. Third, conduct all mandated background checks and verifications. And fourth, document every step of the process and the rationale for any decision made. This ensures accountability and adherence to the law. Question 2. Comparative studies suggest that applicants for a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit often face challenges in distinguishing between general firearm safety knowledge and the specific legal prerequisites for permit issuance. Considering the regulatory framework of Tennessee, which of the following approaches best ensures an applicant meets the statutory requirements for obtaining an enhanced handgun carry permit? Option A. Prioritizing information from online forums and anecdotal advice from other gun owners regarding permit application processes. Option B. Relying on a general understanding of firearm safety principles learned through personal experience or non-certified training programs. Option C. Diligently studying the relevant sections of the Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA, concerning handgun carry permits and ensuring the completed handgun safety course meets the specific curriculum and instructor qualifications mandated by Tennessee law. Option D. Following the concealed carry permit requirements of a neighboring state, assuming they are similar to Tennessee's. The correct answer is C. Diligently studying the relevant sections of the Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA, concerning handgun carry permits and ensuring the completed handgun safety course meets the specific curriculum and instructor qualifications mandated by Tennessee law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the specific requirements for obtaining a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit, while also demonstrating an understanding of responsible firearm ownership and legal compliance. The challenge lies in accurately recalling and applying the detailed provisions of Tennessee law regarding permit eligibility, training, and prohibited conduct, distinguishing between general firearm knowledge and the specific legal framework governing enhanced carry permits in the state. Misinterpreting or misapplying these laws can have serious legal consequences for the applicant. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves thoroughly reviewing the Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA, sections pertaining to handgun carry permits, specifically focusing on TCA Section 39-17-1351 et sec., which outlines the eligibility requirements, grounds for denial, and the definition of a handgun safety course. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the statutory mandates for obtaining an enhanced permit in Tennessee. It ensures the applicant is basing their understanding on the precise legal standards set forth by the state legislature, which is the ultimate authority on permit issuance. This includes understanding the specific training requirements, background check procedures, and any disqualifying factors outlined in the law. Incorrect approach is analysis. Relying solely on general firearm safety principles or information from other states' concealed carry laws is professionally unacceptable. General firearm safety, while important, does not encompass the specific legal requirements for a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit. Similarly, laws from other jurisdictions are irrelevant and can lead to significant legal errors, as Tennessee has its own distinct statutory framework. For instance, a training course approved in another state might not meet the specific curriculum or instructor qualifications mandated by Tennessee law. Furthermore, assuming that permit from another state automatically confers eligibility for a Tennessee permit without meeting Tennessee's specific criteria is a critical legal misstep. Professional reasoning. Professionals seeking to understand or advise on Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit requirements should adopt a process optimization approach by prioritizing official, jurisdiction-specific legal sources. This involves 1. Identifying the governing statutes and regulations, Tennessee Code Annotated. 2. Consulting official guidance from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, or other relevant state agencies responsible for permit administration. 3. Understanding that legal requirements are paramount and supersede general safety advice or out-of-state regulations. 4. Verifying all information against the most current version of the law to ensure compliance. Question 3. The investigation demonstrates that an applicant for a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit has a prior arrest for aggravated assault that was subsequently dismissed. Which of the following actions best represent the appropriate process for evaluating this applicant's eligibility according to Tennessee law? Option A. Grant the enhanced handgun carry permit application without further investigation, assuming a dismissed charge means the applicant is eligible. Option B. Automatically deny the enhanced handgun carry permit application due to the presence of an arrest for aggravated assault, regardless of the dismissal. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the official court records pertaining to the dismissed aggravated assault charge to determine if the underlying circumstances or the nature of the dismissal constitute a disqualifying factor under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351. Option D. Rely on information provided by the applicant regarding the dismissal of the aggravated assault charge without verifying it with official court documentation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the official court records pertaining to the dismissed aggravated assault charge to determine if the underlying circumstances or the nature of the dismissal constitute a disqualifying factor under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where an applicant for a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit has a prior arrest for aggravated assault, which was later dismissed. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires careful judgment to balance the applicant's right to privacy and the state's interest in public safety, while adhering strictly to Tennessee law regarding handgun carry permits. The applicant's past legal entanglement, even if dismissed, necessitates a thorough review to determine its impact on their eligibility. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive review of the dismissed aggravated assault charge, focusing on the specific circumstances of the arrest and the reasons for dismissal, in conjunction with Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA Section 39-17-1351, which outlines the eligibility requirements for an enhanced handgun carry permit. This approach requires obtaining official court records to understand the disposition of the case and assessing whether the underlying conduct, if any, would disqualify the applicant under TCA Section 39-17-1351D or E, which address disqualifying criminal offenses. The permit-issuing authority must ensure that the dismissal was not a plea to a lesser offense that still disqualifies the applicant, and that no other disqualifying factors are present. This meticulous examination ensures compliance with Tennessee law and upholds the integrity of the permitting process. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit solely based on the arrest record, without investigating the disposition of the charge. This fails to acknowledge that a dismissed charge does not equate to a conviction and may not be a disqualifying factor under Tennessee law. Such an action could lead to an unlawful denial and potential legal challenges. Another incorrect approach is to grant the permit without any further inquiry into the dismissed charge, assuming that a dismissal automatically clears the applicant. This overlooks the possibility that the arrest may have been for conduct that, even if not resulting in a conviction, could still raise concerns about the applicant's suitability to carry a handgun, or that the dismissal was part of a plea agreement that still carries disqualifying implications under Tennessee law. This approach compromises public safety by failing to conduct due diligence. A further incorrect approach involves relying on anecdotal information or assumptions about the dismissed charge rather than official documentation. This introduces subjectivity and potential bias into the decision-making process, which is contrary to the objective standards required by Tennessee law for permit issuance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with identifying all relevant statutory requirements for permit eligibility in Tennessee. This includes a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, paying close attention to the disposition of any charges. When a dismissed charge is present, the process must include obtaining and scrutinizing official court records to understand the nature of the charge and the precise terms of its dismissal. This factual investigation should then be directly applied to the disqualifying criteria outlined in TCA Section 39-17-1351. If the investigation reveals no disqualifying factors under Tennessee law, the permit should be issued. If any doubt or ambiguity remains, further investigation or consultation with legal counsel specializing in Tennessee firearms law may be warranted. Question 4. Analysis of Tennessee's enhanced handgun carry permit requirements. An applicant is seeking to understand the legal implications of carrying a handgun in their vehicle while possessing a valid permit. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with Tennessee law? Option A. Relying on advice from a friend who also has a handgun permit and claims it's always legal to carry in a vehicle. Option B. Researching general firearm carry laws on unverified internet forums to understand the rules for vehicle carry. Option C. Consulting the official Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, guidelines and reviewing Tennessee Code Annotated TCA, Section 39-17-1313 regarding carrying handguns in vehicles. Option D. Assuming that since they have a permit, carrying a handgun in their vehicle is permissible without further investigation into specific vehicle carry laws. The correct answer is C. Consulting the official Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, guidelines and reviewing Tennessee Code Annotated TCA, Section 39-17-1313 regarding carrying handguns in vehicles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the nuances of Tennessee's handgun carry permit laws, specifically concerning the legal definition of carrying a handgun and the permissible locations for carrying. Misinterpreting these provisions can lead to unintentional violations of the law, potentially resulting in criminal charges and the denial or revocation of a permit. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all statutory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding of Tennessee Code Annotated TCA, Section 39-17-1307, which outlines the requirements for handgun carry permits. Specifically, an applicant must demonstrate they meet the criteria for lawful possession and carry. This includes understanding that carrying a handgun, as defined by Tennessee law, generally refers to having it on one's person or within one's immediate control. The most appropriate approach for an applicant seeking to understand their rights and responsibilities is to consult the official Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, guidelines and the relevant sections of the Tennessee Code Annotated. This ensures that the applicant is basing their understanding on the authoritative legal framework governing handgun carry permits in Tennessee, thereby minimizing the risk of misinterpretation or violation. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on anecdotal advice from friends or online forums. This is professionally unacceptable because such sources are not authoritative and may contain inaccurate or outdated information. Tennessee law is specific, and relying on unverified information can lead to violations of TCA Section 39-17-1307 and related statutes. Another incorrect approach is to assume that carrying a handgun in a vehicle is permissible without understanding the specific provisions of TCA Section 39-17-1313, which addresses carrying handguns in vehicles. This statute has specific requirements and limitations that must be adhered to, and a general assumption without consulting the law is a significant legal risk. A third incorrect approach is to believe that a valid out-of-state handgun permit automatically grants the same rights and privileges as a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit without verifying reciprocity agreements. While Tennessee has reciprocity with some states, it is not universal, and failing to confirm these agreements can lead to carrying a handgun illegally in Tennessee, violating TCA Section 39-17-1307. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to understanding legal requirements. This involves identifying the governing statutes and regulations, consulting official guidance documents from the relevant state agency, in this case, the TBI, and seeking clarification from legal counsel if any aspect of the law remains unclear. For handgun carry permits in Tennessee, this means prioritizing the Tennessee Code Annotated and TBI resources over informal advice. Question 5. Consider a scenario where an individual in Tennessee has obtained an enhanced handgun carry permit and is transporting their handgun, unloaded and in a locked case, to a licensed shooting range for recreational target practice. Which of the following best describes the lawful use of the handgun in this context as it pertains to their permit? Option A. The handgun can be carried openly or concealed into any establishment that serves alcohol, as the permit overrides such restrictions. Option B. The handgun can be carried into a federal courthouse while en route to the shooting range, as the permit is universally recognized. Option C. The handgun can be displayed to friends at the shooting range to demonstrate its features, as this is a social context. Option D. The handgun is being transported for a lawful purpose, which is a prerequisite for the permit's validity. The correct answer is D. The handgun is being transported for a lawful purpose, which is a prerequisite for the permit's validity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the nuances of Tennessee's handgun carry permit laws, specifically concerning the definition of lawful use and the potential for misinterpreting the scope of the permit. The applicant must understand that a permit grants the right to carry a handgun under specific legal circumstances, not a blanket authorization for any situation involving a firearm. Misinterpreting these boundaries can lead to legal repercussions and jeopardize the permit itself. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between permissible and impermissible actions while carrying a handgun. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding that the Tennessee handgun carry permit is issued for the purpose of carrying a handgun for lawful use. This means the permit holder must be able to articulate a lawful reason for possessing the handgun in a given situation. If the applicant is merely transporting the handgun to a shooting range for recreational purposes, this is generally considered a lawful use under Tennessee law, provided the transportation itself complies with all other applicable Tennessee statutes regarding the transport of handguns, e.g., unloaded in a secure case, separate from ammunition. The permit holder must be prepared to demonstrate this lawful intent if questioned by law enforcement. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume the permit allows carrying a handgun into any establishment that serves alcohol, regardless of the establishment's specific policies or Tennessee's laws prohibiting firearms in such locations. Tennessee law has specific restrictions on carrying handguns in places where alcohol is consumed. Another incorrect approach is to believe the permit automatically grants the right to display or brandish the handgun in a manner that could be perceived as threatening, even if no immediate danger is present. This constitutes unlawful use and can lead to criminal charges. Finally, assuming the permit allows carrying a handgun into a federal building or a courthouse, which are typically off-limits regardless of state permits, is a significant legal misstep. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach situations involving carrying a handgun with a thorough understanding of the specific laws of Tennessee. This includes not only the requirements for obtaining a permit, but also the limitations and responsibilities associated with carrying a handgun. A decision-making framework should involve 1. Confirming the legality of the location for carrying a handgun under Tennessee law. 2. Articulating a clear and lawful purpose for carrying the handgun. 3. Ensuring all transportation and carrying practices comply with Tennessee statutes. 4. Avoiding any actions that could be construed as unlawful use or a threat. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and seek clarification from legal counsel or relevant authorities. Question 6. During the evaluation of an applicant for a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit, an individual reviewing the application discovers a discrepancy between the applicant's stated address and information found in a publicly accessible, but not officially mandated, background check service. The applicant has otherwise completed all required training and provided standard documentation. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Tennessee law? Option A. Proceed with issuing the permit, assuming the discrepancy is a minor administrative error and not relevant to the applicant's eligibility for carrying a handgun. Option B. Contact the applicant and inform them that their application is being suspended due to the discrepancy and advise them to withdraw their application. Option C. Immediately deny the permit application based on the discrepancy without further investigation, citing a lack of transparency from the applicant. Option D. Independently verify the applicant's current residential address through official Tennessee state records or by requesting additional documentation from the applicant that confirms their residency, while continuing the permit evaluation process. The correct answer is D. Independently verify the applicant's current residential address through official Tennessee state records or by requesting additional documentation from the applicant that confirms their residency, while continuing the permit evaluation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the specific requirements of Tennessee's Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit law, while also considering the ethical implications of their actions. The core of the challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the law to a situation involving a potential permit holder who may have a history that could impact their eligibility. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the law and to uphold the integrity of the permitting process. The correct approach involves diligently verifying all information provided by the applicant and cross-referencing it with official records as permitted by law. This includes confirming the applicant's identity, ensuring they meet the age and residency requirements, and thoroughly investigating any criminal history or other disqualifying factors as outlined in Tennessee Code Annotated Title 39, Chapter 17, Part 13. This thorough due diligence is mandated by the legislative intent of the Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit Law, which aims to ensure that permits are issued only to individuals who demonstrate a responsible and law-abiding character, thereby promoting public safety. Adhering to these verification steps is essential for lawful and ethical permit issuance. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-reported information without independent verification. This fails to meet the statutory requirement for due diligence in assessing eligibility and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual, directly contravening the public safety objectives of the law. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss a potential disqualifying factor based on a personal belief or assumption about the applicant's character, rather than objectively evaluating it against the specific criteria established in Tennessee law. This introduces subjective bias and undermines the impartial application of the regulations. Finally, failing to consult official databases or law enforcement records when investigating an applicant's background, as allowed by law, represents a significant lapse in due diligence and a failure to uphold the spirit and letter of the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit Act. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective verification and strict adherence to legal mandates. This involves understanding the specific disqualifiers listed in Tennessee Code Annotated Title 39, Chapter 17, Part 13, and systematically checking each one through authorized channels. When faced with ambiguity or potential issues, the professional should err on the side of caution and seek clarification or further investigation rather than making assumptions. The process should be documented meticulously to demonstrate compliance and accountability. Question 7. Research into Tennessee's Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit requirements reveals that permit holders are generally authorized to carry handguns in many public places. However, specific locations are statutorily prohibited. Considering these prohibitions, if an enhanced handgun carry permit holder is attending a community event held at a local high school gymnasium, which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to Tennessee law? Option A. Carry the handgun and be prepared to leave if asked by school officials, as the permit holder's right to carry should take precedence in a public gathering. Option B. Refrain from carrying the handgun, as schools are explicitly listed as prohibited locations under Tennessee law, regardless of whether the event is open to the public. Option C. Carry the handgun discreetly, assuming that a public event held within a school facility does not fall under the prohibition for permit holders. Option D. Carry the handgun openly, believing that the public nature of the event overrides any restrictions related to the location being a school. The correct answer is B. Refrain from carrying the handgun, as schools are explicitly listed as prohibited locations under Tennessee law, regardless of whether the event is open to the public. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the specific requirements of Tennessee's Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit law while also considering the ethical implications of their actions and the potential for misinterpretation or misuse of their permit. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the precise boundaries of where a permit is valid and where it is not, and acting accordingly to avoid legal repercussions and ensure public safety. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA, Section 39-17-1351, which outlines the locations where carrying a handgun is prohibited, even with an enhanced handgun carry permit. This approach prioritizes adherence to the law by actively seeking clarification on ambiguous situations and erring on the side of caution when unsure. Specifically, it means recognizing that while the permit allows carry in many places, there are explicit statutory exceptions, such as in schools, courthouses, and correctional facilities. When faced with a location that might fall into a gray area, such as a private establishment that also hosts public events, the most responsible action is to consult the relevant statutes or, if necessary, seek guidance from law enforcement or legal counsel before carrying. This proactive and informed stance ensures compliance with TCA Section 39-17-1351 and upholds the ethical responsibility of permit holders to act lawfully and safely. An incorrect approach would be to assume that because a permit is generally valid, it applies universally, ignoring the specific prohibitions outlined in TCA Section 39-17-1351. This could lead to unknowingly violating the law by carrying in a prohibited area, such as a school zone or a polling place on Election Day, which are explicitly forbidden under Tennessee law. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal advice or personal interpretation of the law without verifying it against the statutory text. This can result in a false sense of security and a misunderstanding of legal boundaries, potentially leading to unintentional violations. Finally, carrying a handgun in a manner that could be perceived as threatening or intimidating, even in a permissible location, can create public concern and may lead to interactions with law enforcement, regardless of permit status, highlighting the importance of responsible and discreet carry. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive review of the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit statutes, particularly TCA Section 39-17-1351. When encountering a new or uncertain situation regarding carry locations, the process should involve 1. Identifying the specific location and its nature. 2. Consulting the relevant sections of TCA Section 39-17-1351 to determine if it falls under any explicit prohibitions. 3. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from official sources such as the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, or legal counsel. 4. Prioritizing safety and legal compliance by choosing not to carry in any location where there is doubt about its permissibility. Question 8. Strategic planning requires an individual in Tennessee who holds an enhanced handgun carry permit to consider their responsibilities. If an individual feels increasingly threatened by a neighbor's behavior, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Tennessee law and responsible permit holder conduct? Option A. Thoroughly review the Tennessee Code annotated concerning handgun carry permits and the legal definitions of self-defense, and if necessary, consult with law enforcement or legal counsel regarding the neighbor's behavior and appropriate legal recourse. Option B. Rely on advice from online forums and friends who also own firearms to interpret the legal boundaries of carrying a handgun in response to perceived threats. Option C. Immediately begin carrying the handgun openly in public as a deterrent, believing that visible armament will prevent any escalation of the perceived threat. Option D. Assume that the enhanced handgun carry permit grants the authority to carry a handgun in any situation where a personal threat is felt, regardless of specific legal prohibitions. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly review the Tennessee Code annotated concerning handgun carry permits and the legal definitions of self-defense, and if necessary, consult with law enforcement or legal counsel regarding the neighbor's behavior and appropriate legal recourse. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance personal beliefs and perceived threats with the strict legal requirements for carrying a handgun in Tennessee. Misinterpreting or disregarding these requirements can lead to severe legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges, undermining public safety and trust in responsible gun ownership. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions align with Tennessee law and ethical responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit (ACP) statutes and the training curriculum. This means recognizing that the ACP is granted based on specific criteria and training, and that carrying a handgun is a privilege governed by law, not solely by a subjective assessment of personal threat. The correct approach prioritizes legal compliance and the principles taught during the ACP course, which emphasize responsible firearm handling, legal use of force, and awareness of permit holder responsibilities. This aligns with Tennessee Code Annotated Title 39, Chapter 17, Part 13, which outlines the requirements and regulations for handgun carry permits. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that a perceived threat, even if subjectively significant, automatically justifies carrying a handgun outside the scope of the ACP requirements, or without regard for specific legal limitations. This fails to acknowledge that Tennessee law defines the circumstances under which a handgun may be carried, and that the APE is a permit to carry, not a license to act on perceived threats without legal justification. This approach risks violating Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1306, which details prohibited places and circumstances for handgun carry. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal advice or personal interpretations of gun laws rather than consulting the official Tennessee statutes and the training materials provided for the APE. This can lead to misunderstandings of critical legal nuances, such as the definition of open carry versus concealed carry, or the specific prohibitions on carrying in certain locations. Such reliance on unverified information is a direct contravention of the principle of informed compliance with the law. A further incorrect approach is to believe that once an APE is obtained, the holder is exempt from all further scrutiny or responsibility regarding their conduct while carrying a handgun. This overlooks the ongoing legal obligations and the potential for permit revocation if the holder engages in unlawful activities or demonstrates a pattern of irresponsible behavior. The APE is contingent upon continued adherence to legal standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Tennessee seeking to carry a handgun under an enhanced handgun carry permit must adopt a decision-making framework rooted in legal compliance and responsible conduct. This framework involves 1. Prioritizing a comprehensive understanding of Tennessee's APE statutes and the official training curriculum. 2. Continuously verifying legal requirements and avoiding reliance on informal advice. 3. Recognizing that carrying a handgun is a legal privilege with associated responsibilities, not an unfettered right. 4. Acting with restraint and always considering the legal ramifications of any action involving a firearm. 5. Understanding that subjective feelings of threat must be evaluated within the legal framework of self-defense, as defined by Tennessee law. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit holder is in a dimly lit parking lot and observes an individual pacing near their vehicle, occasionally glancing in their direction. The individual is not making direct threats or overtly aggressive movements, but their behavior is perceived as unsettling by the permit holder. Considering Tennessee law regarding the justified use of force and the responsibilities of a permit holder, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately draw their handgun and confront the individual to ascertain their intentions, believing that any suspicious behavior warrants a proactive defensive posture. Option B. Assess the situation objectively for concrete indicators of immediate danger, considering if a reasonable person would perceive an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm, and if so, consider lawful self-defense options while prioritizing de-escalation and avoiding unnecessary escalation. Option C. Leave the area immediately without engaging the individual, assuming that any perceived unease is sufficient justification for avoiding the situation, regardless of the individual's actual actions. Option D. Brandish their handgun to deter the individual from approaching their vehicle based on the subjective feeling of being watched and the individual's pacing. Correct answer is B. Assess the situation objectively for concrete indicators of immediate danger, considering if a reasonable person would perceive an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm, and if so, consider lawful self-defense options while prioritizing de-escalation and avoiding unnecessary escalation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate perceived need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a handgun in Tennessee. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting the scope of reasonable apprehension of immediate danger as defined by Tennessee law and understanding the limitations and responsibilities that accompany a handgun carry permit. Misinterpreting these nuances can lead to legal repercussions and ethical breaches, underscoring the need for careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the situation against the specific legal standards for justified use of force in Tennessee. This approach prioritizes understanding the objective circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe they are in immediate danger of death or serious bodily harm. It requires considering whether the perceived threat is imminent and if there are any non-lethal alternatives available. This aligns with Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-11-611, which outlines the justifiable use of deadly force, emphasizing that such force is only justified when a person reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily injury to themselves or another. The permit holder's responsibility extends beyond simply carrying a weapon. It includes understanding the legal framework for its lawful and ethical use. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves acting solely on a subjective feeling of unease or a generalized sense of threat without concrete, observable indicators of immediate danger. This fails to meet the objective standard of reasonable apprehension required by Tennessee law. A permit holder is not authorized to use their handgun based on speculation or a vague feeling of discomfort. Another incorrect approach is to assume that the mere presence of a potential adversary, even if acting suspiciously, automatically justifies the brandishing or threatened use of a handgun. Tennessee law requires more than suspicion. It demands a reasonable belief of imminent harm. Escalating a situation by displaying a weapon prematurely, without a clear and present danger, can itself be a violation and potentially provoke a dangerous response. A further incorrect approach is to rely on past experiences or generalized fears rather than the specific, immediate circumstances. While past incidents may inform caution, the legal justification for using a handgun in self-defense in Tennessee is strictly tied to the present, observable threat. Acting based on a generalized fear, without current evidence of imminent danger, is not legally defensible. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Tennessee carrying a handgun under a permit should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and de-escalation. This framework involves 1. Situational awareness, continuously observing the environment for objective indicators of threat. 2. Threat assessment, evaluating the imminence and severity of any perceived danger based on observable actions, not just subjective feelings. 3. Legal standard application, comparing the assessed threat against Tennessee's legal definitions of imminent danger and justifiable use of force. 4. De-escalation prioritization, exploring all reasonable avenues to avoid confrontation or the need for force. 5. Legal counsel consultation, understanding that if a situation approaches the threshold of justified force, seeking legal advice is paramount. This systematic approach ensures actions are grounded in law and ethical responsibility. Question 10. The performance metrics show an increase in reported incidents where Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit holders may have violated the terms of their permit. A specific incident involves a permit holder who was reportedly involved in a verbal altercation at a public establishment, with a witness claiming the permit holder made a veiled threat. The total number of reported incidents over the last quarter is 15, and the average number of incidents per quarter over the past 2 years is 12. The standard deviation for these quarterly incidents is 3. If the current quarter's incident count is considered an outlier, what is the probability that a permit holder involved in a verbal altercation with a veiled threat, as described, will be subject to an immediate permit suspension based on a strict interpretation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351G? 1. Option A. The probability is 0.50 as the veiled threat is ambiguous and requires further investigation to determine intent and potential violation. Option B. The probability is 0.95 as the permit holder's actions, even if only a verbal altercation, are inherently risky and warrant immediate suspension to ensure public safety. Option C. The probability cannot be determined without specific evidence of the veiled threat constituting a criminal offense under Tennessee law, which is a prerequisite for suspension under TCA Section 39-17-1351G. 1. Option D. The probability is 0.0001 as the increase in incidents suggests a systemic issue requiring immediate preventative action. Correct answer is C. The probability cannot be determined without specific evidence of the veiled threat constituting a criminal offense under Tennessee law, which is a prerequisite for suspension under TCA Section 39-17-1351G. 1. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in the number of reported incidents involving the misuse of a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a careful balance between upholding the rights of permit holders and ensuring public safety, all within the specific legal framework of Tennessee. The decision-making process must be grounded in a thorough understanding of Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA Section 39-17-1351, and related statutes governing handgun carry permits. The best approach involves a meticulous review of all available evidence, including incident reports, witness statements, and any relevant legal documentation, to determine if a violation of Tennessee law has occurred. This approach is correct because it adheres to the due process requirements and the specific grounds for permit suspension or revocation outlined in TCA Section 39-17-1366. By focusing on factual evidence and legal compliance, this method ensures that any administrative action taken is justified and defensible under Tennessee law, protecting both the public and the rights of the permit holder. An incorrect approach would be to act solely on a single, uncorroborated report without further investigation. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence required by Tennessee law, which necessitates a thorough examination of facts before any action is taken. Such an approach risks arbitrary enforcement and potential legal challenges for improper revocation or suspension. Another incorrect approach is to base a decision on the perceived reputation or past behavior of the permit holder, rather than on specific, current violations. Tennessee law focuses on present conduct and adherence to permit conditions, relying on assumptions or hearsay, rather than concrete evidence of a violation of TCA Section 39-17-1351 or related statutes, is a significant ethical and legal failing. A further incorrect approach is to apply a penalty that is not proportionate to the alleged offense, or to deviate from the established procedures for permit review and disciplinary action as defined by Tennessee law. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the legal framework and can lead to unfair outcomes and legal repercussions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based analysis, strict adherence to Tennessee statutes and regulations, and a commitment to fairness and due process. This involves gathering all relevant information, objectively assessing it against legal standards, consulting legal counsel when necessary, and documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them. Question 11. System analysis indicates that a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit holder, while lawfully carrying their permitted handgun, enters a municipal building where a sign clearly prohibits the carrying of firearms. The permit holder believes they are acting within their rights due to the permit and a general sense of needing to be prepared for potential threats. Based on Tennessee law, what is the most appropriate course of action for the permit holder in this situation? Option A. Immediately exit the municipal building and refrain from carrying the handgun inside any location where firearms are prohibited by law or posted signage. Option B. Proceed with carrying the handgun, asserting that the permit allows for carrying in any location for self-defense purposes. Option C. Argue with building security or staff about the validity of the permit and the right to carry. Option D. Remain in the building but conceal the handgun more effectively, believing the permit offers sufficient protection. The correct answer is A. Immediately exit the municipal building and refrain from carrying the handgun inside any location where firearms are prohibited by law or posted signage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance their personal beliefs and perceived rights with the strict legal requirements for carrying a handgun in Tennessee. The challenge lies in interpreting the scope of the Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit Act and understanding the limitations imposed by Tennessee law, even when an individual feels they are acting in self-defense. Misinterpreting these laws can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions align with legal mandates, not just personal interpretations of necessity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves strictly adhering to the Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA, regarding the carrying of handguns, specifically TCA Section 39-17-1351, which outlines the permissible locations and circumstances for carrying a handgun with an APE. This approach prioritizes legal compliance by recognizing that an APE grants a permit to carry, but does not override specific prohibitions on carrying in certain locations, such as state or municipal buildings where proper signage is posted. The individual's belief that they were acting in self-defense, while a potential defense in other contexts, does not grant an exception to these location-based prohibitions under Tennessee law for permit holders. The permit holder's responsibility is to know and follow these restrictions. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on the belief that the Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit (ACE) grants broad authority to carry a handgun anywhere for self-defense, regardless of posted signage. This fails to acknowledge that Tennessee law, as codified in TCA Section 39-17-1351, specifically prohibits carrying in certain locations, such as government buildings. Even with a permit, if notice is given by signage, permit is a privilege, not an absolute right to carry in all places. Another incorrect approach is to assume that a perceived threat justifies carrying a handgun into a prohibited area. While self-defense is a fundamental right, the ACE framework in Tennessee requires permit holders to respect the legal restrictions on where they can carry. Entering a prohibited area, even with the intent of self-defense, is a violation of the permit's terms in Tennessee law. The legal framework prioritizes preventing the presence of firearms in sensitive locations, regardless of the permit holder's subjective assessment of immediate danger. A third incorrect approach is to disregard posted signage prohibiting firearms, believing that the ACE supersedes such restrictions. Tennessee law is clear that proper signage serves as legal notice of prohibition. The ACE holder has a duty to recognize and obey these signs. Failing to do so constitutes a violation of the permit's conditions and Tennessee statutes. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Tennessee seeking or holding an enhanced handgun carry permit should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal knowledge and adherence. This framework involves 1. Understanding the explicit rights and limitations granted by the ACE under Tennessee Code annotated. 2. Familiarizing oneself with all prohibited locations as defined by TCA Section 39-17-1351 and recognizing the legal weight of posted signage. 3. Evaluating personal circumstances against these legal restrictions, rather than allowing subjective interpretations of self-defense needs to override statutory prohibitions. 4. Seeking clarification from official sources, such as the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation or legal counsel, when in doubt about specific carrying regulations. This systematic approach ensures responsible firearm ownership and compliance with Tennessee law. Question 12. Which approach would be most consistent with the responsible and legal carrying of a handgun under Tennessee's Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit regulations when experiencing a vague sense of unease in a public place? Option A. Objectively assess the situation for any immediate, credible threat to life or bodily harm, and only consider drawing or using the firearm if such a threat is imminent and unavoidable by other means. Option B. Rely on the feeling of unease as sufficient justification to prepare to use the handgun if the situation deteriorates, without needing further objective evidence of immediate danger. Option C. Immediately draw and display the handgun to deter any potential aggressor, based on the feeling of unease. Option D. Confront the individuals or circumstances causing the feeling of unease to ascertain the nature of the perceived threat. Correct answer is A. Objectively assess the situation for any immediate, credible threat to life or bodily harm, and only consider drawing or using the firearm if such a threat is imminent and unavoidable by other means. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a handgun in Tennessee. The individual's perception of a threat, while potentially valid, must be assessed against the specific requirements and limitations of Tennessee's Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit (ACE) laws. Misinterpreting the situation or acting impulsively can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation or criminal charges, and compromise public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the immediate threat and a clear understanding of the legal boundaries for using a handgun for self-defense under Tennessee law. This means recognizing that the ACE permits carrying a handgun for lawful purposes, including self-defense, but does not grant a license to engage in aggressive or preemptive action based solely on perceived, non-imminent threats. The individual must evaluate if the threat is immediate, credible, and unavoidable by other means, aligning with Tennessee's self-defense statutes. This approach prioritizes de-escalation and adherence to legal standards, ensuring that any action taken is justifiable and within the scope of the permit. Incorrect approach is analysis. Acting on a vague feeling of unease without a concrete, immediate threat is a regulatory and ethical failure. Tennessee law requires a demonstrable threat to life or bodily harm to justify the use of deadly force. Relying solely on a subjective feeling, without objective evidence of danger, would violate these principles and could be construed as reckless endangerment or brandishing. Similarly, confronting the perceived source of unease directly, especially in a manner that could be interpreted as aggressive or provocative, is not permitted under the Act. The permit is for carrying, not for initiating confrontations. Furthermore, assuming the perceived threat is sufficient justification for drawing or displaying the firearm without an immediate, unavoidable danger is a critical misinterpretation of self-defense laws and a violation of the responsible carrying principles taught in Act courses. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes situational awareness, objective threat assessment, and strict adherence to legal parameters. This involves asking, is there an immediate and unavoidable threat to my life or the life of another? Is my response proportionate to the threat? Am I acting within the legal framework of Tennessee's self-defense and handgun carry laws? If the answer to any of these questions is uncertain or negative, the professional course of action is to disengage, seek assistance from law enforcement if necessary, and avoid any action that could escalate the situation or violate legal statutes. Question 13. Investigation of a tense verbal confrontation in a public park in Tennessee, where an individual with an enhanced handgun carry permit feels increasingly threatened by another individual's aggressive posturing and shouting, but has not yet been physically touched or directly threatened with a weapon. What is the most appropriate course of action for the permit holder? Option A. Assess the immediate threat level, prioritize de-escalation and safe disengagement if possible, and only consider the use of the handgun if there is an imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. Option B. Engage in a shouting match to match the aggressive individual's tone and attempt to intimidate them into leaving. Option C. Immediately draw the handgun to deter the aggressive individual and assert dominance. Option D. Assume the permit allows for the use of the handgun to defend against any perceived threat, regardless of imminence or severity. The correct answer is A. Assess the immediate threat level, prioritize de-escalation and safe disengagement if possible, and only consider the use of the handgun if there is an imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance their right to self-defense with the legal obligations and responsibilities associated with carrying a handgun in public in Tennessee. The core of the challenge lies in discerning when the use of force is legally justified and ethically permissible under Tennessee law, particularly when faced with a perceived threat that may not escalate to immediate physical danger. Careful judgment is required to avoid unnecessary escalation or the unlawful use of a firearm. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the immediate threat to oneself or others, considering the totality of the circumstances, and adhering strictly to Tennessee's legal standards for the use of deadly force. This approach prioritizes de-escalation and avoidance of conflict whenever safely possible, while recognizing the legal right to defend oneself if faced with imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. Tennessee law, specifically concerning the enhanced handgun carry permit, emphasizes that the permit does not grant a license to use a handgun in any situation, but rather to carry it under specific legal conditions. The decision to use a firearm must be based on a reasonable belief that such force is necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily injury, as outlined in Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-11-611. This approach aligns with the ethical responsibility to act with restraint and only when legally and morally compelled. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately drawing or brandishing the handgun at the first sign of verbal aggression or a perceived slight. This fails to meet the legal threshold for the imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury required for the use of deadly force in Tennessee. It constitutes an unlawful display of a weapon and could lead to criminal charges, even if no physical harm occurs. Another incorrect approach is to assume that having an enhanced handgun carry permit automatically justifies the use of the firearm in any situation where one feels threatened or uncomfortable. This misunderstands the scope of the permit, which is for carrying, not for initiating or escalating confrontations. The permit does not override the legal requirements for self-defense. A further incorrect approach is to engage in a verbal argument or physical altercation with the individual, believing that the presence of the handgun will deter them, without assessing the immediate risk of serious harm. This can lead to an escalation of the situation, potentially resulting in the handgun being used against the permit holder or innocent bystanders, and does not adhere to the principle of avoiding conflict when possible. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes situational awareness, threat assessment, and adherence to legal statutes. This involves 1. Recognizing and assessing the environment for potential threats. 2. Evaluating the nature and imminence of any perceived threat, distinguishing between verbal aggression and immediate physical danger. 3. Prioritizing de-escalation and safe disengagement whenever feasible. 4. If faced with imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury, understanding and applying the legal standards for the use of deadly force as defined by Tennessee law. 5. Always acting within the bounds of the law and ethical responsibilities associated with carrying a firearm. Question 14. Assessment of a situation in a Tennessee parking lot where an individual is verbally confronting you aggressively, gesturing wildly and standing uncomfortably close, but not physically touching you or making any direct threats of physical violence. You are legally carrying a handgun under your enhanced handgun carry permit. What is the most prudent and legally sound course of action? Option A. Continue the verbal argument, matching the individual's aggressive tone. Option B. Draw your handgun and verbally warn the individual to back away. Option C. Stand your ground and wait for the individual to make the first physical move. Option D. Disengage from the verbal confrontation. Calmly state you do not wish to engage and walk away to a safe distance. The correct answer is D. Disengage from the verbal confrontation. Calmly state you do not wish to engage and walk away to a safe distance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of Tennessee's enhanced handgun carry permit laws in a dynamic, potentially confrontational situation. The core difficulty lies in balancing the legal right to carry a handgun with the responsibility to act lawfully and avoid escalating a dispute. A permit holder must exercise sound judgment, understand the nuances of self-defense laws, and recognize when de-escalation or disengagement is the most appropriate course of action, even when feeling threatened. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves prioritizing de-escalation and avoiding unnecessary confrontation. This means assessing the situation to determine if immediate physical threat exists and if retreat is a viable option. If no immediate threat is present, the permit holder should disengage from the verbal altercation and leave the area. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of a permit holder to act as a responsible citizen, minimizing the potential for violence and adhering to the spirit of the law, which is to allow for lawful self-defense, not to provoke or engage in disputes. Tennessee law, while permitting carry, does not mandate or encourage the use of a handgun in non-life-threatening situations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Engaging in a verbal argument and displaying the handgun without an immediate, overt threat of serious bodily harm or death is a failure to exercise sound judgment and could be interpreted as an aggressive act, potentially leading to criminal charges or civil liability. This approach violates the principle of using force only when absolutely necessary for self-defense. Another incorrect approach is to immediately draw the handgun and issue a verbal warning. While seemingly assertive, this action can escalate a situation rapidly and may be perceived as an unlawful threat if the other party does not pose an immediate danger. Furthermore, it bypasses opportunities for de-escalation and retreat, which are preferred lawful actions. Finally, ignoring the situation and continuing to engage in the argument without considering personal safety or the legal implications of the interaction is also professionally unsound. While disengagement is key, it must be a conscious decision made with an awareness of the potential risks and legal boundaries. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes threat assessment, de-escalation, and lawful retreat. This involves 1. Situational awareness, continuously assessing the environment and the behavior of others. 2. Threat evaluation, determining if there is an immediate credible threat of serious bodily harm or death. 3. De-escalation, attempting to calm the situation verbally or by disengaging. 4. Retreat, if possible and safe, removing oneself from the situation. 5. Last resort, only considering the use of a handgun as a last resort when all other options are exhausted and there is an imminent threat to life or limb. Question 15. Quality control measures reveal that a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit holder is regularly carrying their handgun into a convenience store that has a dedicated section for the sale of beer and liquor, alongside groceries and other convenience items. The store owner has not posted any signs prohibiting firearms and has verbally indicated to the permit holder that they are welcome to carry there. Based on Tennessee law, what is the most legally sound course of action for the permit holder? Option A. Carry the handgun only in areas of the store where alcohol is not sold, such as the grocery aisle. Option B. Cease carrying the handgun in the convenience store due to the primary business purpose potentially being the sale of alcoholic beverages, which is a prohibited location under Tennessee law. Option C. Assume that as long as the permit holder is not consuming alcohol on the premises, carrying the handgun is permissible. Option D. Continue carrying the handgun in the convenience store, as the owner has not posted signs and has given verbal permission, and the store also sells other goods. The correct answer is B. Cease carrying the handgun in the convenience store due to the primary business purpose, potentially being the sale of alcoholic beverages, which is a prohibited location under Tennessee law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance their personal beliefs and perceived rights with the strict legal requirements for carrying a handgun in Tennessee. The core challenge lies in interpreting and applying Tennessee law accurately, particularly concerning the definition of lawful purpose and the restrictions on carrying a handgun in specific locations, even with a permit. Misinterpreting these laws can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions align with legal mandates, not just personal interpretations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves understanding that a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit does not grant an unrestricted right to carry a handgun in all circumstances. Specifically, Tennessee Law T.C.A. Section 39-17-1306 prohibits carrying a handgun in certain locations, regardless of permit status, including any polling place during an election, any courthouse, or any facility that is primarily dedicated to the business of alcoholic beverages. Therefore, the permit holder must be aware of and adhere to these statutory restrictions. The correct approach is to recognize that carrying a handgun into a business that primarily serves alcoholic beverages, even if it also sells other goods, is a violation of Tennessee law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the business also sells groceries, it is not primarily dedicated to the business of alcoholic beverages. This misinterprets the statutory language, which focuses on the primary purpose of the establishment. If the primary business activity is the sale of alcohol, the prohibition applies. Another incorrect approach is to believe that the Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit overrides all location-based restrictions. This is fundamentally flawed, as the permit grants carry privileges under specific conditions, not blanket immunity from all prohibitions. A further incorrect approach is to rely on the owner's informal permission. While a property owner can generally prohibit firearms on their private property, this does not negate state law restrictions on carrying in legally defined prohibited locations. The permit holder's responsibility is to know and follow state law, which is paramount. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Tennessee, when carrying a handgun with a permit, must adopt a proactive and informed decision-making framework. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the Tennessee Code annotated T.C.A. provisions related to handgun carry permits and prohibited locations. 2. Regularly reviewing and staying updated on any changes to these laws. 3. Applying a strict interpretation of the law, erring on the side of caution when in doubt about the legality of carrying in a particular location. 4. Prioritizing legal compliance over personal assumptions or the opinions of others. 5. Recognizing that the permit is a privilege, not an absolute right, and is subject to specific legal limitations. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that a permit holder in Tennessee is involved in a situation where an individual is verbally aggressive and approaching them rapidly in a crowded public space. The permit holder feels threatened but is not yet physically touched or directly attacked. Which of the following actions best reflects responsible decision-making under Tennessee's Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit requirements? Option A. Immediately draw the handgun to deter the aggressive individual and prevent any potential escalation. Option B. Brandish the handgun to intimidate the aggressive individual and force them to retreat, even if there is no immediate physical attack. Option C. Assess the imminence of the threat, attempt to de-escalate or create distance, and only consider drawing the handgun if the aggressor's actions clearly indicate an immediate intent to cause death or serious bodily injury. Option D. Rely on the fact that possessing an enhanced handgun carry permit allows for the drawing of the weapon in any situation where one feels uncomfortable or threatened. The correct answer is C. Assess the imminence of the threat, attempt to de-escalate or create distance, and only consider drawing the handgun if the aggressor's actions clearly indicate an immediate intent to cause death or serious bodily injury. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a handgun in Tennessee. The core of the challenge lies in accurately assessing the imminence of a threat and ensuring that any defensive action taken is both necessary and proportionate, all while adhering to the specific requirements of Tennessee's enhanced handgun carry permit laws. Misjudgment can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the revocation of the permit, as well as ethical repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and immediate assessment of the situation to determine if the threat is imminent and unavoidable by any other means. This approach prioritizes de-escalation and avoidance whenever possible, resorting to the use of a handgun only as a last resort when facing a credible threat of death or serious bodily injury. This aligns with Tennessee Code Annotated, TCA, Section 39-11-611, which outlines the justifiable use of deadly force, requiring that the person reasonably believes the force is necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily injury to oneself or another. The permit itself is granted under the premise of responsible and lawful carry, which inherently includes the judicious application of force. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately draw the handgun upon perceiving a potential threat, without first attempting to de-escalate or create distance. This fails to meet the legal standard of imminence and necessity, required by TCA Section 39-11-611, as it presumes a threat that may not be immediate or unavoidable. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the fact that one possesses an enhanced handgun carry permit as justification for drawing the weapon in any perceived stressful situation. The permit signifies authorization to carry, not a blanket authorization to use the weapon preemptively or without meeting the legal criteria for self-defense. Finally, an approach that involves brandishing the weapon to intimidate or deter a potential aggressor without an immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury is also legally and ethically flawed, as it can constitute aggravated assault under Tennessee law and violates the principles of responsible firearm ownership. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with threat assessment. This involves evaluating the nature of the perceived threat, its proximity, and the likelihood of immediate harm. If a threat is identified, the next step is to consider all available options for de-escalation and avoidance. This includes verbal commands, creating distance, or seeking cover. Only when these options are exhausted and the threat of imminent death or serious bodily injury remains unavoidable should the use of a handgun be considered. This systematic approach ensures that actions are legally justifiable, ethically sound, and consistent with the responsibilities of carrying a concealed handgun in Tennessee. Question 17. Quality control measures reveal that a Tennessee enhanced handgun carry permit holder, while en route to vote on Election Day, perceives a potentially aggressive individual loitering near the entrance of the polling station. The permit holder is carrying their permitted handgun. Considering Tennessee law, what is the most appropriate course of action for the permit holder? Option A. Remain at the polling station entrance, openly displaying the handgun to deter any potential aggression. Option B. Confront the individual to assess the threat level before deciding whether to enter the polling station. Option C. Enter the polling station discreetly, keeping the handgun concealed, believing the perceived threat justifies carrying it in a prohibited location. Option D. Leave the vicinity of the polling station and seek an alternative method to ensure personal safety, or report the suspicious individual to authorities. Correct answer is D. Leave the vicinity of the polling station and seek an alternative method to ensure personal safety, or report the suspicious individual to authorities. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a handgun in Tennessee. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit (EAP) laws, specifically regarding the permissible locations for carrying a handgun, even when the permit holder believes they are acting in a defensive capacity. Misinterpreting these laws can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions align with legal requirements and responsible firearm ownership. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding that the Tennessee EAP statute, specifically Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351, outlines specific prohibitions on carrying handguns in certain locations, regardless of the permit holder's intent. Even if an individual feels threatened, carrying a handgun into a prohibited location, such as a polling place on election day or a courthouse, is a violation of the law. Therefore, the correct approach is to disengage from the situation and seek alternative means of ensuring safety without violating the EAP regulations. This prioritizes legal compliance and responsible permit holder conduct. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that a perceived threat negates the legal restrictions on carrying a handgun in prohibited locations. This fails to recognize that Tennessee law does not provide an exception for self-defense in these specific prohibited areas. Another incorrect approach is to rely on a subjective interpretation of reasonable belief of immediate danger to justify carrying a handgun into a prohibited zone. The law is specific about prohibited locations, and subjective beliefs do not override these explicit statutory restrictions. Finally, attempting to conceal the handgun in a prohibited location after entering it, with the belief that this rectifies the violation, is also an incorrect approach. The act of carrying the handgun into the prohibited location itself constitutes the violation, regardless of subsequent concealment efforts. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Tennessee should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adhering to the specific provisions of the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit statute. This framework involves 1. Knowing the explicit prohibitions outlined in Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1351. 2. Recognizing that perceived threats do not create exceptions to these prohibitions. 3. Prioritizing de-escalation and disengagement when encountering potentially threatening situations in or near prohibited areas. 4. Seeking lawful alternatives for safety, such as contacting law enforcement, rather than compromising legal compliance. Question 18. Quality control measures reveal that a Tennessee resident who owns a handgun but has not obtained an enhanced handgun carry permit feels increasingly concerned about their personal safety due to escalating neighborhood crime. They are considering carrying their handgun openly while running errands in public. Which of the following actions best aligns with Tennessee's regulatory framework for handgun carry? Option A. Rely on the fact of handgun ownership as sufficient authorization to carry it in public. Option B. Carry the handgun concealed, assuming it is less likely to be noticed and therefore permissible. Option C. Obtain a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit before carrying the handgun in public. Option D. Carry the handgun openly in public, believing the perceived threat justifies it. The correct answer is C. Obtain a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit before carrying the handgun in public. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a handgun in Tennessee. Core of the challenge lies in understanding the nuances of permit requirements and the potential consequences of carrying a handgun without proper authorization, even when facing a perceived threat. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions taken are both effective for personal safety and compliant with Tennessee law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and adhering to the specific requirements for carrying a handgun in Tennessee. This means ensuring that one possesses a valid enhanced handgun carry permit issued by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, if carrying a handgun in a public place, as stipulated by Tennessee Code Annotated TCA, Section 39-17-1351. The permit signifies that the individual has met the training and background check requirements mandated by the state, thereby demonstrating a level of competency and suitability for carrying a handgun. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and responsible firearm ownership, which are fundamental ethical considerations for permit holders. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a perceived threat automatically grants the right to carry a handgun without a permit. Tennessee law does not provide a blanket exemption for carrying a handgun in public solely based on a subjective feeling of being threatened, without possessing the required permit. This failure to comply with TCA Section 39-17-1351 can lead to criminal charges. Another incorrect approach is to rely on outdated or incomplete information regarding permit requirements. The laws governing handgun carry permits can evolve, and it is the responsibility of the permit holder to stay informed. Carrying a handgun based on a misunderstanding of current regulations, such as believing a permit is not needed for concealed carry in certain locations or under specific circumstances not recognized by law, is a significant regulatory failure. A third incorrect approach is to believe that simply owning a handgun grants the right to carry it openly or concealed in public without a permit. Tennessee law clearly distinguishes between the right to own a firearm and the right to carry it in public, which requires a permit. This misunderstanding bypasses the legal framework designed to ensure responsible public carry. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical responsibility. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding all applicable state laws and regulations regarding firearm possession and carry, specifically the Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit requirements. 2. Staying current with any legislative changes or updates to these laws. 3. Consulting official sources, such as the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation or legal counsel, for clarification when in doubt. 4. Prioritizing personal safety through legal and responsible means, which includes obtaining and maintaining the necessary permits before carrying a handgun in public. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that a Tennessee Enhanced Handgun Carry Permit holder residing in a home with minor children has been storing their handgun in a bedside table drawer that is not locked. Considering Tennessee law, which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and legally compliant method for storing the handgun when not in immediate use? Option A. Place the handgun in a closet on a high shelf, but leave the closet door unlocked. Option B. Leave the handgun on a kitchen counter while the permit holder is actively preparing a meal in the same room. Option C. Store the handgun in a bedside table drawer that is not locked, but out of the immediate line of sight of children. Option D. Store the handgun in a locked gun safe or a securely locked container that only the permit holder can access. The correct answer is D. Store the handgun in a locked gun safe or a securely locked container that only the permit holder can access. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in judgment regarding the storage of a handgun. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance personal convenience with strict adherence to Tennessee law concerning firearm safety and accessibility. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting securely stored and accessible only to the permit holder in a practical, everyday context, especially when others may be present in the home. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance without undue burden, while prioritizing safety and legal obligations. The best approach involves ensuring the handgun is stored in a manner that prevents unauthorized access by individuals who are not the permit holder, while still allowing the permit holder to retrieve it promptly if necessary. This means utilizing a locking mechanism or a secure location that is not readily accessible to children or other unauthorized persons. Tennessee law emphasizes that a handgun must be stored so that it is not accessible to a minor or any other person prohibited from possessing a handgun. Furthermore, the permit holder must be able to retrieve the handgun for lawful self-defense. Storing the handgun in a locked container or a secured safe that only the permit holder can access, or in a location that is inaccessible to minors and other prohibited individuals, directly fulfills these requirements. Storing the handgun in a bedside table drawer that is not locked, even if the permit holder believes it is out of sight, is a failure. This approach is problematic because a bedside table drawer, while potentially out of immediate view, is generally not considered securely stored under Tennessee law if it can be easily opened by a minor or another prohibited person. The law requires a higher standard of security to prevent unauthorized access. Leaving the handgun on a kitchen counter while preparing a meal, even if the permit holder is present in the home, is also a failure. This action directly violates the requirement that the handgun be securely stored and accessible only to the permit holder. Leaving a firearm in plain view on a counter makes it readily accessible to anyone in the vicinity, including minors or visitors who may not be legally permitted to handle a firearm, and does not meet the standard of secure storage. Placing the handgun in a closet on a high shelf, but leaving the closet door unlocked, represents another failure. While a high shelf might deter very young children, an unlocked closet door means the handgun is not truly secured against access by older minors or other individuals who might be able to reach it or open the door. The intent of the law is to prevent access by anyone other than the permit holder, and an unlocked closet does not guarantee this. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and safety. This involves understanding the specific requirements of Tennessee law regarding handgun storage, considering potential risks and vulnerabilities in the home environment, and choosing storage methods that unequivocally meet the legal standard of secure storage and restricted access. When in doubt, erring on the side of greater security and stricter adherence to the law is the most prudent course of action. Question 20. Compliance review shows a handgun carry permit renewal application has been submitted in Tennessee. The statutory renewal fee is $50.00 and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation (TBI) background check surcharge is $10.00. What is the total correct fee to be assessed for this renewal? Option A $60.00. Option B $50.00. Option C $70.00. Option D $25.00. The correct answer is A $60.00. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the accurate calculation of permit renewal fees based on specific Tennessee statutes. Miscalculating the fee can lead to financial discrepancies, potential noncompliance with state regulations, and an erosion of public trust in the permitting authority. Careful judgment is required to ensure the correct fee is assessed according to the established fee schedule and any applicable surcharges. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves directly applying the statutory renewal fee for a handgun carry permit and adding the statutorily mandated surcharge for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation (TBI) background check. This approach is correct because Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1352 F1 clearly outlines the renewal fee, and Section 39-17-1352 F2 specifies the additional fee for the TBI background check. Adhering strictly to these codified amounts ensures compliance and accurate financial processing. Incorrect approaches analysis. Assessing only the base renewal fee without the TBI surcharge is incorrect because it fails to account for a mandatory component of the permit renewal process as defined by Tennessee law. This undercollection of fees constitutes a violation of the statutory fee structure. Calculating the fee based on a prorated amount of the initial application fee is incorrect. Tennessee law specifies a fixed renewal fee and a separate, fixed surcharge for the background check, not a prorated amount. This approach disregards the explicit statutory provisions for renewal costs. Adding an arbitrary administrative fee not explicitly authorized by Tennessee Code Annotated for handgun carry permit renewals is incorrect. Such an addition would represent an unauthorized charge, potentially leading to overcollection and a violation of state financial regulations governing permit fees. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should utilize a decision-making framework that prioritizes statutory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the specific service being rendered, handgun carry permit renewal. 2. Consulting the relevant Tennessee Code annotated sections pertaining to permit fees and surcharges. 3. Performing precise calculations based on the codified amounts. 4. Documenting the calculation process for auditability. 5. Verifying the final fee against statutory requirements before assessment.